Hello and welcome, everyone. If you love learning and want to cut straight through the noise to understand how research actually works, you are in the exact right place today. This explainer is going to take some notoriously abstract research concepts and transform them into a practical, ready-to-use toolkit. We're taking a deep dive into the absolute foundation of data and research, variables. And, even better, we're going to learn how to instantly organize and classify them using something called the FIRM framework.
Let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. We all know the scientific method, right? Asking a question, forming a hypothesis, collecting data, analyzing results, and drawing conclusions. Well, it's really easy to look at this and think of variables as just boring statistics buried somewhere in the analyze phase. But honestly, that is completely backwards. Variables are the fundamental dynamic building blocks of this entire cycle. Without them, you literally can't even ask a measurable question, let alone form a hypothesis. They are the living pulse of all scientific discovery. So, here is our roadmap for today. First, quantitative research fundamentals. Second, defining a variable. Third, the FIRM framework. And fourth, applying FIRM in research.
Section 1. Quantitative Research Fundamentals. Let's get the basics down.
Okay, before we get tangled up in heavy academic language, let's anchor ourselves with a simple, crystal-clear definition. A variable is a measurable characteristic of a population. That's it. Really. It's just a trait, a feature, or a quality that we can actually measure. If you can measure it across a group of people, objects, or events, boom, you've got yourself a variable.
Moving on to Section 2. Defining a variable. Let's look at how the experts see it.
First up, we have researchers Cresswell and Cresswell from 2018. They state that a variable refers to a characteristic or attribute of an individual or an organization that can be measured or observed and that varies among the people or organizations being studied. I actually really love this definition because of its focus on empirical reality. What Cresswell is telling us is that variables aren't just abstract ideas. They have to be firmly grounded in observation. You literally have to be able to measure it in real people or real organizations.
Next, let's check out Earl Bobby's 2021 definition. He says, a variable is a logical set of attributes. Variables are characteristics that differ from one case to another and are measured in research. Notice the contrast here? Bobby introduces this fantastic concept of a logical set of attributes. He focuses heavily on how variables help us categorize and systematically differentiate one specific case from another. It's all about the logic of classifying differences.
Finally, we have Sekaran and Bougie from 2019. Now, they take a much broader view, defining a variable as anything that can take on differing or varying values. But here is the kicker. They specify that these values might differ at different times for the same object or at the same time for different objects. They are explicitly highlighting temporal variance, how things fluctuate across time, like a stock price changing daily, as well as cross-sectional variance.
So what does this all mean for us? Well, the absolutely crucial point is that we can synthesize these three perspectives into one unified superpower. From Cresswell, we know variables must be empirically measured in subjects. From Babby, we know they operate as logical groupings that differentiate cases. And from Sekaran and Bougie, we know they capture fluctuations across time and across different subjects. Simply put, a variable is a characteristic that can be logically grouped, empirically measured, and observed as it changes.
Which brings us to Section 3, the FIRM framework. Let's organize your data.
Now that we know exactly what a variable is, how on earth do we organize them when we're in the thick of actually doing research? I am so incredibly excited to introduce you to the ultimate visual checklist for your research design, FIRM. Whenever you are faced with a research question, you'll run your variables through these 4 steps to completely master your data. F stands for format, I stands for identify, R is for role, and M is for measurement level. Let's break every single one down.
The F in FIRM stands for format. This one simply asks, how is the variable recorded? Is it recorded in words or is it recorded in numbers? If your variable is collected using words or descriptions, it is qualitative data. For example, if you ask someone their favorite color, they'll say something like blue, yellow, or green. But if your variable is recorded in numbers, it's quantitative data. Think about measuring a person's height in centimeters, like 168 or 175. Words versus numbers, that's your format.
Next is I for identify. This is where you locate the variables in your research question and simply count how many there are. You'll see the complexity of a research question scales up pretty chronologically here. If you have just one single variable, it's a univariate study. If you are looking at two variables and how they interact, it's bivariate. And if you are dealing with 3 or more variables, you, my friend, have just stepped into multivariate research.
Let's ground this identify step in the real world with some micro-examples straight from our source material. Univariate? That's asking, what are the color preferences of persons who purchase laptop computers? Just one variable, color. Bivariate? Is there a relationship between advertising expenditure and monthly sales revenue among small retail businesses? We've got two variables here, ad spend and sales revenue. And multivariate? How does calorie consumption and hours of exercise impact weight? Now we've got 3 variables in the mix.
Moving right along to the R in FIRM, which is role. Once you've identified your variables, you have to decide their job description. Basically, which one is doing the influencing and which one is being influenced. The independent variable is the cause. It impacts or influences the other variable. Think of the advertising spend we just looked at, or calories consumed. The dependent variable is the effect. It's the outcome being influenced, like the resulting sales revenue or a person's weight. Oh, and if you only have one variable, like those laptop colors, we simply call that a standalone variable.
Finally, we hit the M in FIRM, measurement level. And this brilliantly illustrates how we classify the precision of our data into specific buckets. Nominal data is just for naming categories, like our laptop colors. Ordinal data implies a logical order, like classifying revenue into preset categories, say $10,000 to $12,000. Interval data has equal spacing but no true zero, like measuring temperature in Celsius or Fahrenheit. And ratio data? That gives us exact, absolute figures with a true 0 point, like an exact ad spend of $2,200 or a precise dietary intake of 1,500 calories.
And that takes us to our final section, Section 4, Applying FIRM in the Real World.
All right, here is your rapid recap of the full framework to lock this into your memory. When you look at your research data, I want you to immediately ask yourself, F, format. Are these words or numbers? I, identify. How many variables am I dealing with? R, role. Which is the independent cause and which is the dependent effect? And M, measurement. Is this nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio data? Memorize this checklist, and I promise you, you will never feel lost when designing a quantitative study again.
I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to test your new knowledge right now. Imagine you're studying the impact of hours of sleep on final exam scores. Take a second. How would you classify those variables using the FIRM framework? Seriously, think about the format, count them up, assign their roles, and figure out their measurement levels. Try applying what you've learned today, and you'll see just how powerful this structured approach really is. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking great questions, and I will catch you next time.